Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Bylaw Review Ad Hoc Steering Committee on Wednesday, September 21st, 2022. Director Kroll, could you please lead us in the opening prayer?
Sir, please join us in the sign of our faith. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Ever-loving God, awaken in us the patience to be incomplete and to be in the process of becoming closer to you and your people. Help us to know that slow is real, that gradual is divine, and keep gently asking for our participation in the work of salvation. Give us ways to respond, give us the energy to be actively engaged in the lives around us and the world you have given us. Amen. Son of the Holy Spirit.
Thank you. We will now move on to the approval of the June 15th, 2022 minutes. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to those minutes? Seeing that there's none, we will go to a recorded vote. Trustee O'Hearn-Chernata?
In favor.
Trustee Duart?
In favor.
Trustee O'Brien?
In favor.
Trustee Guzzo?
In favor.
And who else do we have on? That is it. And Trustee Murphy is in favor. The motion carries. We'll move on to review of suggested changes to bylaws. So we have in your package, there was two sets. One was this set with all of the changes. So it showed what was added, deleted, removed, modified, color-coded. And then the second copy was the cleaner version with all of those previous things removed. So what I wanted to do was to go through the comments that are on the side that maybe required just a little confirmation, or there could be potentially some verbiage that you haven't seen before, because we asked Parliamentary Kapoor to create that verbiage. I don't want to get into rehashing what we've already done. We've done a year and a bit of work already on that. This is the document that we're looking at moving forward with. So at the end of tonight, I think we need to, and correct me if I'm wrong, Parliamentary Kapoor, we'll move a motion that once this document has, as we finalize it tonight, has been presented and vetted and modified if required by legal, then that document goes to the board meeting to be voted on. So does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So we will start. Now, does it make more sense, Parliamentary Kapoor, for you to lead this discussion through the comments, since most of the comments are yours?
That works for me.
Okay.
My plan would be to, as you said, Chair, not to go over material that the committee has already seen, but to focus on, as you said, the new areas.
Right. Okay. I was told last night that I talk too much, and I dominate the microphone. So this is a good learning experience for me to try and relinquish control. So please go ahead.
Thank you. And if you start on page 4 of the PDF, so that's the first page of the revised and track changes version. And you will see that there are some comments that are there, some that are grayed out. The comments that are grayed out are ones where I have taken instruction from the committee and incorporated it in. And if you look at item 2.4, that actually, I could have done grayed out this one. That was a decision at the May 24 Bylaws Review Committee to remove the term working group from ad hoc committees, as we were trying to differentiate committees of the board from staff working groups.
Rosie, can you go to the next set of documents. This is the one that has most of the previous language. So if we can go to the cleaner document, would be great. Thank you.
I'm just going to go down to that. So that's page 29. That's the clean version without all of the track changes.
Clean version was sent to trustees.
Yes, in that, in the package that was sent out to you, there's page 29 of, it should be 57 pages.
There's 2 pages. There was 2 files. One file sent by Rosie.
Yeah,
Everything was one file, so there was only the email here, only one attachment, and a link to the agenda package. So the one, so there were no 2 files. There's only one file that was.
So if you scroll through that whole document,
Okay.
you'll go agenda minutes, big copy, all one.
Yeah, I'm looking at that.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so item 212, there's a comment there, in camera, stay the way it is, and that may be one of the areas to confirm with you regarding in camera. And just as an example of what we're skipping over, 214, see there's a grayed out comment that isn't something that was decided 26th meeting. That's a change that's been quoted. 222, again, differentiating a staff working group versus a committee of this of trust of board. Between 229 and 230 is the same thing. I will flag for you that we've done the math on 3.1 term, the date that your term of office has changed to November 15th from the beginning of December. And you will see the phrase on the first Tuesday on or after November 15th. That is in compliance with the new date of the term of office. And it happens to be that the first Tuesday on or after November 15th has to be the third Tuesday. So that way it also fits well within your current board meeting schedule. So it meets the new law and doesn't require a change to your schedule. And that, if we scroll down now, I'm on page 33, 371 and 372 deal with that same date change regarding the meeting where the new chair election occurs each year. Oh, I have flagged 4.1.9 at the bottom of page 33 of 37. You have decided at a previously that how we were going to deal with abstentions. This one is what vote is required to conduct business beyond 11:30. Whether it's, and it still says without the unanimous consent of members present. In this case, if anyone abstains, that would require the meeting to adjourn. We could say we're going to adopt the same principle throughout the bylaw and abstentions don't count, or we could keep it as it is.
My preference would be that we adopt the same principle because then it gets too confusing. So maybe I'll ask for consensus on that subject. Trustee O'Hearn, Trinado?
And I'm just getting clarity. I think it needs to remain consistent. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Trustee DeRosa? Trustee Duhart?
Change my name.
And I was looking right at you when I said it too.
Yeah, consistency is what would help.
Okay. Trustee O'Brien?
Can you just clarify that, please?
So currently, the verbiage we have is that it requires 2/3 consent of those present. So if you abstain, then that counts as a no. Where previously we have specifically said abstentions do not count as a no, do not count to the tally. So what Y was proposing is that we keep it consistent, and that in this case, it's the same thing. If somebody abstains, then it doesn't count as a no. So say, for example, everybody is in agreement to proceed and one person abstains, then we would proceed. The way it's written now, we would not proceed.
And so if someone abstains, we would calculate the majority of people that are voting.
Yeah, so it doesn't, yeah, their vote does not count towards the tally. So if there is 9 trustees and we need 9 to proceed, if somebody abstains, we only need 8 to proceed.
I'll go for that. Thank you.
Okay. And Trustee Guzzo.
Consistency.
So that will require.
Sorry,
add the word-
I'm agreeing with you, Chair Murphy. I hope that came across.
Right now, it's written that if you abstain, it would have a no vote. So we're changing it to be consistent.
And I'm not sure why I left that particular one as it is, but now we're clear and voting. Moving on, 4.2 special board meetings. Just throughout, we've tried to clarify what applies to in regular board meetings and what applies to special board meetings. And as you see, 4.3.1, the in-camera that precedes the regular meeting, it's just now specified that applies to the regular meetings and not to special. Moving on to the next changes of note are in 4.4 electronic meetings policy, particularly 4.4.3, 4.4.4, and 4.4.5. Committee did decide on May 24th that individual connectivity is the trustee's responsibility, and consider a time limit to reconnect, and that was 3 minutes. So 4.4.3 states that the trustees or student trustees are responsible for their own connection to the internet and to Teams. And that if a trustee is prevented from participating because of the poor quality of their own connection or the loss of their connection, that the board can still proceed and that its actions are still valid as long as there is a quorum. 4.4.4 says that if a trustee loses their connection while they're participating in debate or asking questions, that the meeting will continue with the other trustees. Let's say an example, a trustee is allocated 3 minutes to speak to a motion. 1 minute in, their connection is lost. Debate would continue with the rest of the trustees. And if that trustee is able to reestablish the connection before debate is done and vote occurs, the trustee would be able to complete their 2 minutes that are remaining. If, however, the debate is over, there's no one else willing to speak, to a vote, or that trustee can reconnect, and that's that. The trustee does not get to.
Trustee O'Hearn Chernato, you have a question?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to get some clarity on that. 3 minutes to get back the connection. That could mean in any form, correct? Like the intention is if I need to call, somebody, another trustee, because I can't reconnect, but I really want to be involved, I can still call them on a board phone to participate in the meeting.
So
It's not just email.
there's very specific of what is deemed to be in attendance in a meeting, right? So that I know we've had discussions before where a person has been on virtually, we've seen their picture, they've lost connection and phoned in. We've deemed them still to be in attendance because we verified visually that they were actually in the meeting at one time. So I think, so what as a chair has to verify and to be able to attest that that is actually that person. So if you're doing it electronically via text is a problem, right? Because that could be anybody. So it may be parliamentary or maybe that, I don't know if that's more of a legal question, but maybe you can comment on that.
Sorry,
And I think that's a call that the chair makes at the time.
And just to use an example, so I'm at home and I'm on the internet, I'm on Teams. All of a sudden the power goes out in Georgetown. So I cannot reconnect within 3 minutes. It's not going to happen. So I need to find another means. So I would call a fellow colleague or the director of education or somebody so that I can participate in that meeting. Is this still the spirit of this, is to allow that to happen?
Yes, so we have various ways of connecting. One is to phone into the board. So voice, to me, voice is fine because we know and recognize your voice and we can attest that that is you. If somebody chose to only communicate via text, that's a problem, I believe, right? Because there is no way to attest that that's who is really communicating.
So do we think, or I don't want to get too much in the weeds here, but do we need to specify something like that?
That's the responsibility of the chair to make that call, to make that determination. And that is, I could be wrong, but I believe it is specified in the Education Act along those lines. And yeah, that's a call you make at the table. Right? So we wouldn't allow somebody. So for example, we don't allow proxy voting. Perfect example. Why? So we have to be able to attest that that is actually the person voting. And I think, auditorily or audible is easy because we recognize people's voice. Electronically is more of a challenge.
We have also had situations where the person is on Teams but unable to turn the video or speak, but the person has typed in the chat box, I vote in favor. So, but we don't have the chat box enabled now, so that's
right. So part of that though is there's an invitation, right? They are invited to the meeting and it's somewhat secure, but that's more of I think a call for the chair to make at that time. That's part of the chair's responsibility. Parliamentary Kapoor, you can tell me I'm completely wrong if you must. Just do it gently.
Not at all. The aspect that is important to note is most of this can be covered. This kind of detail can be covered in policy rather than necessarily being in the bylaw. And in fact, your bylaw does. Your policy currently says electronic meetings shall permit trustees and or student trustees to hear and be heard, audio and or visual teleconference and or video conference meetings. So that would cover the situation where you have an audio and you can verify that, yes, it is Trustee Smith who is saying, I speak in favor or oppose. The other point I want to make is that the 3-minute deadline, according to this, only applies to voting. If for debate or questions, it's more flexible. It's until debate is closed. So if you are the only person who wishes to speak to a motion, and 1 minute in you lose your connection. If no one else wants to speak with the motion, the board will move to a vote rather than. So that's a flexible time period for debate, but for voting, you'll be allowed 3 minutes.
So we would stand at ease for 3 minutes.
During the vote.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Now, to be devil's advocate, is that standing at ease 3 minutes per incident or per trustee?
I think the way it's worded, it is per,
The 3 minutes is for a vote. So when you,
So the vote won't go more than 3 minutes. That's fine. Okay, that makes sense.
okay, there it is again. So if you look at 445, what would happen if someone is not there, doesn't respond to during a vote? Then you would complete the vote, the rest of the vote, and then 3 minutes would kick in. So it would be once per vote. And if you had more than one trustee who had been knocked off, if there was a blackout that covered all of Milton, and there were 2 trustees who weren't able to connect, the rest of the votes would be recorded, and then 3 minutes would allow time for hopefully the others to do it. So that is that's putting meat on the bones of the requirement of making trustees responsible for their own connections. So 443, 444, and 445. All right, 722, you do appoint non-trustees to some committees, for example, audit. So just made it clear that that process applies to all of the trustee appointments, all of the appointments, rather not just ones of trustees. Yes, we move on to item 9, the agenda. So you'll notice that this was language that was done before I got involved with this committee. In 9.5, called item 1, call to order, you have added in our father, the oath of citizenship. That was a decision that was made by the committee before I was involved. And I've added in item 6 as per decision of March 7th for consent agenda items. And that is, you will note, occurring after presentations and delegations, but before any action such as approval of minutes. On to 9.7, where I've detailed the process of the consent agenda. So this is during the agenda setting meeting, the chair and vice chair in consultation with the secretary may place any items on the consent agenda that they believe will not be non-controversial. And I've given some examples, such as approval of minutes, resolution re-absentees, and action items recommended to the board from a committee. During approval of the agenda, any individual trustee or student trustee may say, I want item X removed from the consent agenda. It would be placed in its usual place. And whatever is left on the consent agenda, there will be a single motion to approve all the items on the consent agenda, and that will require a mover, a seconder, and there will be no debate on that. And of course, trying to cover all bases, if that motion is defeated, all those individual items go to their normal place. I was going to use yesterday's meeting as an example just to talk you through it. Thought that was helpful, but I see the light is on, Chair.
Okay, let's see what Trustee O'Brien has the floor. He has a question. Let's see what his question is.
Thank you, through Mr. Chair. Not a question. I was just gonna almost say what I think parliamentary report is gonna say. Last night, Chair Duarte kind of made a move in this kind of direction with the policy, and I thought that was really good. I know there was consent, but I could see how that would be a really good thing, and I think this is a good direction to go into. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you. I think once we were comfortable with it, you know, last night was a good example where there was 3 or 4 that everybody agreed to. There was absolutely no reason not to do it. It's just a matter of building confidence and trust in the system, I think. Parliamentary Kapoor, did you want to add something?
Just clarification, Mr. Chair, the consent agenda, have you defined that somewhere? I'm trying to look for the definition of consent agenda. Should have been on top in the beginning of the document.
Well, it's not, well, 9.5, item 6 in the agenda is consent agenda items.
Yeah.
And 9.7, I've described how items get placed on the consent agenda and the process that is followed.
Correct. So the definition of consent should have been in the beginning of the document, where all definitions are there.
We had the definition of consent, and I think we removed it, right?
No.
Didn't we?
Not there on the original.
Not consent agenda, of consent.
There's consent there, but not consent to
Yeah.
the agenda.
Another question, Director Cole brought up, which
Point
is
of-
actually key.
Point of privilege, Mr. Chair. I can hear you really clearly. I'm having a hard time hearing Chair Duarte and Parliamentary Kapoor. You're coming through clear, but they are really hard to hear. That's just from my standpoint. Thank you.
I think the problem is if we have more than one mic on at a time, I have a tendency to leave my mic on. So I'll just make sure I turn it off. Thank you for letting me know. So the question was, can we add things? So the chair and director and vice chair put things on the consent agenda, which is published in the meeting package. Could the group, once it's at the table, then say, oh, can we add this item that is on the current agenda? Can we move this up to the consent agenda?
Can you hear me better with this microphone, Trustee O'Brien?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. It would be unusual to do it that way. It would require unanimous consent to move something onto the consent agenda that the chair and vice chair hadn't already done.
Mr. Chair, just to clarify, there's consensus definition, not consent. Two different things.
Sorry, my mic's off. So it would be something like consent agenda are items that are decided by the chair and vice chair and are non-controversial. Well, actually, I think you had the description. You just had the description somewhere, Parliamentary Kapoor, right? You just read it.
Move that up.
Sure, yes. So you're saying that I summarize that language, motions that the chair and vice chair believe will be non-controversial, that are intended to be voted on as a group with one undebatable motion. Okay. Sure. Okay. So I worked so hard on using yesterday as an example. There were 7 business items. What would have happened is three of them had dissenting votes or had questions. So you could remove, any trustee could remove an item for the consent agenda for either reason. If they wanted to have a question to clarify, or they wish to dissent or vote against it. For either reason, an item could be taken off the consent agenda. So yesterday, as has been noted, you would have dealt with the 4 remaining business items all in one motion, one vote. And I trust that was close enough in line with what Trustee O'Brien said that I haven't now taken away the consensus. Moving down, clarified the language about how items get added on the motion. The other one is 913. And I'm just highlighting 913 and 914 here. these were decisions that have been made. The deadline, oh, by the way, there is a language change that the final agenda will now be published, distributed and put out on Thursday rather than Friday. And that was a language change that was done before I got involved in this process. I just wanted to flag that for you. I found it, I just noted it. So notice of motion. The idea here is that the notice of motion can be done in time, that the agenda can be included on the agenda so that public members would be able to know where to find it and would have enough awareness of when it's going on. So as I understand it, the agenda is distributed currently on Friday, and then after the deadline for correspondence, which is 3 p.m. Monday, then the agenda that is on the website is augmented with all of that correspondence that arrives. So it's on the agenda that's available the night of the meeting, actually before the meeting. So this assigns the same deadline for trustees to give notice of motion. That a notice of motion from a trustee must be submitted in writing by 3 p.m. the day before the regular meeting of the board. And we'll deal with the exception in a moment. The language that it takes is the same as what's in your current bylaw. It may be accompanied by an explanatory note. So the trustee who is bringing the notice of motion would give in any explanatory note at the same time. It will show up on the agenda. Shall be taken as read and recorded in the minutes. Means that it doesn't have to be read out loud at the meeting because it will be in the agenda that's available at the meeting itself. So it doesn't need to be read in full. However, any trustee can request that it be read in full. And again, no debate or comment at the meeting. So 9:14.
Can I ask?
Yeah, we have trustee Orentrada first, and then we'll go to you.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So I just have a question. I'm trying to figure out the logistics here. So we're talking about a notice of motion. So right now, current state is at the meeting, we create a notice of motion. So we verbalize it and say we have a notice of motion. We put it at the end of the agenda, and then we get writing. So we're saying that notice of motions must be submitted. So on Tuesday, I have to walk this through. On Tuesday, I'm going to put a notice of motion in. So Monday by 3, I have to submit my notice of motion with details or just the name of it?
The full motion.
The whole thing.
The wording of the motion and any explanatory note that you may wish to add.
Okay, so that's on them. So our meetings are Tuesday. So Monday by 3, that has to be submitted. And then how do we get that in our agenda package? Because the agenda package.
It's modified on Monday once correspondence received. So the agenda is really finalized Monday at 3 p.m.
And then we'll get another package out with the revised agenda with any notice of motions that came through that day.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
The agenda you get on Friday is final in terms of any action items and information items. The version that is augmented, that is done after 3 p.m. Monday, also includes correspondence that was received before deadline, and now would also include the notice of motion. So if you look at the version that you receive on Friday, it does not currently, and I'm looking to Rosie to make sure I'm saying this correctly, it doesn't necessarily include all the correspondence that's been received, because we don't receive some correspondence until Monday. After that deadline, the agenda is augmented with correspondence that's been received by 3 p.m. Monday. And that's the version that if you go on the website, that's the version that's available during the meeting.
Okay. So
and in this case, notice of motion would also be on that agenda.
Okay. So current state, future state is going to be, we have to have the agenda out by Thursday. So we get the agenda on Thursday with all the action items in, and then by Monday at 3 PM is when we'll get the full package with correspondence, any notice of motions, et cetera, for the meeting on Tuesday. Do we need to say business day? I know it sounds small, but it says the day before. Like, I know it sounds silly, but should we just
Well,
put business day?
but
before?
we now change that a day to the board means any day. Holiday, statutory holiday, weekend, we've made that change. A day is a day. A day is 24 hours. It doesn't have a specific
So
significance.
if we ever had a meeting on Monday, then
Yep.
Rosie would have to send us at 3 o'clock on Sunday afternoon.
You've already stated that your regular meetings will happen on Tuesdays, the
Okay.
first and third Tuesday, and this applies to regular meetings.
Okay, perfect. Okay,
Now, there is an issue if, say, earlier this month, the deadline was 3 PM on Labor Day. You met the day after Labor Day. So there are some occasions where someone will need to be receiving those and updating that, either on Labor Day or Tuesday morning.
and that's more of an exception than a rule.
Yeah, I would say so. Trustee Dort?
Mr. Chair, I have two points of clarification. First of all, must be submitted in writing by 3 PM the day before the regular. Can you clarify to whom it's going to be submitted, whether it's the chair or to the secretary or to whom? Because it's not clear to whom it's going to be submitted. So that's one thing. And second thing is the timing is 3 PM, but I think correspondence deadline is 5 PM. It's 3 PM too? Okay, so then that's fine. But can we just clarify that one part?
So I would assume it would have to be submitted, really should be submitted to the chair, should it not? Because at the meeting, it's submitted to the chair. Or would it be considered submitted to the secretary of the board?
Just to be consistent, I think correspondence goes to the secretary of the board. I think for consistency's sake, it could be the same thing. Rosie?
Actually, it would show up as, it would be added to the list of information items, which currently is item 11 of the agenda. Or sorry, I've written it in here. Item 12, miscellaneous information. The title would be added to the agenda as miscellaneous information, and the entire written motion would be at its appropriate spot in the package. That's right, yes.
Yeah, so really the intent was just to prevent things from happening on the fly and surprises, and to give our constituents or ratepayers a heads up of what's coming, and they could be more engaged. So that's kind of the spirit of why this change was made.
And just to remind you, as I mentioned, I believe during the committee meeting, some of your neighboring boards have a 1-week deadline, and some of your boards actually require it to be done at the meeting before, so it doesn't become an action meeting until 2 meetings after the notice is provided during the meeting. So that is the normal way of doing it. The committee decided that there may be some notices that need to be done during the meeting because of things that happen during the meeting. So say during a delegation, an information item, or a staff report, some information is received and a trustee wants to have a notice of motion for the next meeting. That is specified in the new 914. That if something comes up during an information item and someone says, I want to give a notice of motion for the next meeting, it must be submitted in writing before the adjournment of the current meeting. And the rest of it is pretty similar, other than then can be read aloud and recorded in the minutes. Now, that is open to, let's say, some stretching of the envelope. And so I put in a clarified, and this is, I believe, the way it would normally work, but I put it in clear and explicitly. The chair will determine whether the notice of motion meets the criteria for this section. If not, the chair will rule the notice out of order under this section and require that it be submitted under 913. So let's, if I can give you an example. You are at your meeting on Tuesday, the 1st of a month. Some item is presented and a trustee says, well, based on the information we just heard, I want to bring a notice of motion for the next meeting, the meeting on the 15th. The chair, and they would need to quickly put that in writing and submit it before that the meeting on the 1st adjourns. And it would be read aloud. That way any member of the public would be able to hear it and say, okay, that's going to show up on the 15th. If someone is trying to stretch that and say, well, I'm making this notice of motion based on something I heard from an information item, the chair explicitly here has the authority to say, that's not related to what we heard. That is a different item. It's not germane or directly related to what we heard. And therefore, you cannot bring it as a notice of motion tonight for the 15th. You can submit it through the normal channels as a notice of motion at the 15th meeting, and it would be heard at the first meeting next month. That ruling of the chair can, of course, be appealed. But that is, I'm trying to give some protection, and I'll give the chair some tools to prevent this from being abused. I was trying to find a gentler word, but that's the rationale of the wording of 914.
Yeah, just a quick question, not directly related to the point that you were just raising. Just in terms of workflow.
Then the chair would have to rule that out of order.
Right. In terms of workflow, so like there have been times we've had 100 items of correspondence for board packages. Is there an expectation in the way the bylaws are written that the updated agenda has to be delivered on the Monday before the board meeting? So I'm just thinking of a couple holidays there. I'm thinking of our wonderful support staff and not wanting them to have to work on those days. So is there provision to allow for them to be received on the Monday by 3 o'clock, but not provided trustees till Tuesday?
Right now, there isn't, right? There isn't that provision. So we would have to write that in, excluding holiday Mondays. And then excluding holiday Mondays, and it would be acceptable to have them by noon the day of the meeting, I guess. Something like that, right?
What I've put in here doesn't contemplate a change in the workflow. So there is no expectation of when what I'll call the augmented agenda that includes the correspondence is put out. I think the actual drop dead deadline for that would be before the board meeting begins on Tuesday evening. So workflow means it could be done on Tuesday. We could, I guess we could ask Rosie, let's use Labor Day as an example. There was some correspondence received this month that was put in the augmented agenda for September 6th. I'm not sure when that augmented agenda was put out. But there's no expectation in this bylaws as to when the augmented agenda would be put out. There's just an assumption in my head that it would have to be before the board meeting starts.
And I think we did that a couple of times during COVID. There was something very specific that came, and we put it in the agenda package. And it was, basically, there was one case, it was half hour before the meeting. I don't remember specifically what it was, but we have done that, yeah.
I myself am willing to take that out. You know, take if it's a non-working day, a holiday, because really it's an augmented agenda. So what are we getting in the augmented agenda? Correspondence and a notice of motion that right now we get Tuesday night, right? So how it's not going to negatively affect us too much, I don't think. Like we're gonna be able to read the correspondence on the day of the meeting, and we're going to see the notice of motion that's going to be presented, but not actually spoken about or debated until the next board meeting.
Right. Yeah. The reality is there's no real impact to your ability to function at the meeting.
No, because on
Absolutely.
Thursday, we're going to get the full package. Now we're going to get Thursday, the full package to digest until our meeting on Tuesday. This is just speaking about the augmented with the correspondence and any notices of motion that we might not get till Tuesday in the morning. If it's a holiday, how many times does that happen? Labor Day and what, Thanksgiving? Twice? 3 times?
Yeah, I think we've done it in the past where, yeah, so a good example was during the Pride flag, the influx of correspondence was tremendous. So what we did, it had to be electronically posted by, I think at that time was 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock. So we didn't necessarily do anything with it, but if it was, it went in the queue and then it was added to that week's correspondence. And if it was after 5, it went to the following weeks, or we gave the person the option of putting it on the following week. So all it had to do was be electronically flagged at that time and it qualified. But yes, it didn't mean that the agenda went out right away.
What,
Oh, sorry, Tim. We were having a discussion here. I didn't see your hand. Please go ahead.
No worries. I hear Janet's point, your point. I wonder if we just pick a time on the day of the meeting that we all agree to. I mean, I would say 4 o'clock for me anyway, on the day of the meeting for any correspondence or notice of motions would be enough time. It's still going to be 2 hours to look at it. I don't know how other trustees feel.
Let's go to Parliamentary Kapoor, then I'll go to you, Trustee Dork.
so I just want to make sure we're clear on what we're discussing. There are two things that are two deadlines that we're talking about. The first deadline is the one that's in the bylaw language, 3 p.m. the day before the regular meeting, and that is the current deadline for correspondence, and the proposed deadline for notices of motion. What Director Kroll, for some reason I want to say it something where Director Kroll's question was, is there a deadline for the augmented agenda that includes the correspondence that was received by 3 p.m. Monday and the notice of motion? There is not one currently in the bylaw or proposed in the bylaw. And as I said, de facto, the deadline would be for the augmented agenda would be before the meeting begins. We could add in 9.2 an idea of saying that this is the final agenda will be provided on Thursday, and recognize that there will be an augmented agenda that includes correspondence and notices of motion received by the deadline, and that augmented agenda will be posted on the website as soon as practicable, but before the meeting begins.
I think that's a good clarifying point, and really that is our practice now. So there was hard deadlines when things were added to the meeting agenda and weren't. But then again, you're right, there wasn't a hard time to get that augmented agenda out to people. So I think if we just added that, those clarifying points in 9.2 might clear up any confusion. Please go ahead, Trustee Dewar.
So I'm still at 9.14 and I have a bit of a problem. I want all of us to think about this line here. A trustee may submit a notice of motion during a regular meeting of the board if it arises and is related directly to the presentation of a delegation, information item or staff report. So delegations already have an action item, the three options there to choose from. Say if we decide to choose the delegation as received information, it does not stop a trustee from saying, I want to put a notice of motion on the same topic again. So why are we giving two opportunities for the same purpose? So we have presentation of a delegation done, decided. Oh. So yeah, so my problem is presentation of delegation. I don't think we should have a notice of motion on a delegation which has already been decided upon by the Board of Trustees. The other items, information item is a verbal or written report. Okay, we could have a notice of motion there, or a staff report. Staff reports have action items generally, so it's okay to leave them there. Even staff report, I have a problem because staff reports are defined as having action items in most cases. So, but presentation of a delegation, I want us to think about because the board has decided and made a decision. Why are we giving a chance again? So, just clarify here.
You say the same thing I'm going to say, but go ahead.
The earlier bylaws committee decision was that we're removing action item as one of the allowed responses to a delegation. So the only allowed, let me see if I can find it, is that responses to delegation is either receive for information, refer to a committee, or refer to staff. So you cannot, and this was part of the thing that the committee decided, was that you cannot receive a delegation and do an action item based on that delegation at the same meeting without unanimous consent. So that is item, I believe, item 12. It's delegations, specifically 12.8.
Okay, I missed that, but again,
So
if we have made a decision on the delegation, why are we making another allowance for the same delegations?
So we had this debate and that's what the majority agreed to. For the record, I was against it, but that's besides the point. Yeah, and now we're beyond going back and rehashing those specific things. That's the challenge with the way where we're at. Trustee O'Hearn, did you have a?
Yeah, I was just going to say to that point. So we have a delegation, and I listen to the delegation in my own mind. I think, oh, this subject or topic warrants a notice of motion. So in this, I'm understanding that I could put forth a notice of motion, and you, being the chair now, could say, yes, that's germane, or no, it's not, it's out of order. Either way, if I really want to put a notice of motion, then the next meeting, I'm just going to put the notice of motion in. So if it's something timely, it may actually help, to be honest with you.
I think, so look at intent the way it was written, and then there's opportunity to change it. So, the reality is if we're in a pandemic situation and we need to make a decision as a board, we can always suspend the rules. We can always do things so we can move forward in a decision to make a decision. So we're trying to streamline activity at the board table, which doesn't surprise, take a left turn, what have you. To me, this complicates it, but that's the decision we made. So at this point, we need to live with it, unfortunately. Trustee O'Brien, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know we made the decision, but I do hear what Chair Duarte says. And Trustee Hornzanona, in a sense, you can always put forward a notice of motion on anything, within reason, of course. I guess the question is, are there delegations ever that do bring forward motions that are timely? And you yourself said we can suspend the rules. I mean, can we go back and revisit that decision? Because I think Chair Duarte made a good point. We made a decision that delegations we would accept for information or staff report. And this is sort of a way to, I wouldn't say wiggle out of it, but you can still put a notice of motion forward. Can we go back and revisit that? I'm just putting that forward. I'm easy either way because it still gives you 2 weeks to think about it. The other way, it would take you 4 weeks because you'd be putting the notice of motion the next meeting, which would be 2 weeks, and then the action item would be 2 weeks after that. But I'd just like to throw it out. If people want to reconsider it, I'd be willing to go back there, but I'm okay with this too. Thanks.
Unfortunately, we can't reconsider it because right now there's only 4 members of the committee on, so we're really out of quorum. Trustee Guzzo had an illness and had to leave, so we're really doing this more for information and clarity, and it wouldn't be appropriate, wouldn't be able to go back and Parliamentary Kapoor, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we'd be able to make any of those decisions right now.
Sorry, I thought Trustee Guzzo was with us. My apologies.
You are correct, Chair. This is now just for information. Some clarifying.
Yeah. Sorry, and I should have mentioned when she dropped off. She texted Director Kroll. So sorry about that. But even it's problematic to change any. To me, it's problematic to change once we've gone through these several meetings and are at this stage. I think any further changes need to be passed at the board table in a board meeting.
I really think we're okay, team, because I think the chair, whoever the chair is at the time when this is happening, right, we're talking hypothetically, can always say this is not germane to the topic. So that stops it right there. And yes, it can be appealed, but but I think for something that may be timely, I think it may need to stay so that we can be effective. I don't know. I'm speaking hypothetically, right? I think it's okay.
I think my thought was just the logistics. Say again, same point, if it goes to a committee and the committee is going to take 3-4 weeks to come back with the report. In the meantime, we have a notice of motion saying take action on this right away. How is that going to work?
I agree with you. It goes against what we're trying to do, but it is what it is. Yeah. Trustee O'Brien, did you have a further point?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. So now what we can always happen once it goes to legal, comes to the board. So a question for you, Parliamentary Kapoor. Once it comes back to the board table, do we have to accept this document as it is, or could further amendments? So to me, this document is a whole document. We're voting to accept the document. We're not voting to approve every change and ratify. So to me, it would have to be adopted, yes or no, gets adopted. Then if you wanted to change 19.4, you would move a notice of motion or send it back, refer back to policy or whatever the case may be.
I'm using the analogy of other policies that have come up to the board, and the board is able to amend those policies rather than just make it a yes/no decision and unamendable. And based on that precedent and Roberts, I have to say the amendments could be made.
That was the sound of the wind going out of my sails. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. So that you have the option. I don't want to be, I should slap myself for saying this. You have the option at the board meeting of amending 914.
I'm okay with that because the committee has agreed, but I'm just throwing it out there that this were my thoughts which occurred to me. And so another question, Mr. Chair, is we do not have quorum tonight. So how are we passing this on to the board?
So we don't need quorum to pass it on. To legal, we need quorum? No, so that's what, so we're passing this on to legal. So then what is going to happen is I'm gonna be in receipt of a vetted document. I'm gonna have to move a notice of motion at one of our board meetings to introduce it.
So as I understand previous decisions of this committee and my previous recommendation, you have agreed that you will need legal vetting of this bylaw. So I believe that you can, without a formal motion here today, take this or a slightly changed version based on the discussion to legal and then have legal report back. I'm checking the terms of I'm just trying to find the terms of reference for this committee. You may have to, when you receive the legally vetted version, have a meeting and make a formal motion at this committee to take it, recommend it to the board.
Okay, because I seem to recall in their terms of reference was to send it to legal, and then I believe we had that discussion that it would go directly to the board from legal in one of those meetings. But we'll verify that. We'll verify that. So maybe what we'll do, Parliamentary Kapoor, is we'll keep going on with review the document, and we could stand at ease at the end for 5 or 10 minutes, and then you could verify that, and then we'll give that final summation of what our next steps are.
Okay, so that was 9:13 and 9:14. And motions, any amendments must be in writing. That was an April 26th decision. Changes. Member in debate is bolded 10-8. I think that's been dealt. That's not new language. Says that it mentioned before that a member, after being recognized, shall abide by the board's code of conduct. We just clarified it to say the member at all times must need to abide by the code of conduct, is allowed to speak only after being recognized by the chair, give comments addressed to the chair. It's not changing anything. It just seemed a little bit unusual to say that a member must abide by the board's code of conduct after they've been recognized. It's actually at all times. Their timelines and decisions and options there are based on decisions that were made and being quite clear. Right, we added in a 1025 to amend something previously adopted. That is per a decision that was made May 24th, showing you the line I put in there. It's a main motion, requires notice, as all do, and a majority vote to differentiate it from receipt. Voting, as we've discussed, we're using the principle that all the abstentions don't count. We just clarified that. Obligations and submissions, 12.8, as we've just discussed. There was one occasion where all four options were defeated on our delegation response, and as per the investigator's recommendation, it now is that the board, if the delegation is automatically received as information, unless a motion is adopted to refer it to a committee or to request a staff report. So those are, the board can take one of two actions. If the board takes neither action, there's no vote required to receive this information. The amendments we discussed, reporting by way of minutes didn't change. And the new section 17, this was taken out of the in-camera section because it doesn't always apply to in-camera. The language was not changed here because this is one of the areas which will require legal vetting to ensure that it's in line with the Act and any regulations there may be. I just highlighted a couple of areas where I saw things that may not be in the Act, but that's for the legal counsel to opine. So that takes us to the end of the bylaws. I have heard commentary. Oh,
Can I clarify, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
This code of conduct is a policy. So if this is being updated, that policy needs to be updated at the same time.
I don't know if it needs to be updated at exactly the same time, but it will need assuming the bylaw is adopted, whatever changes are made in the bylaw, the policy should be advanced for review to ensure that it is updated to be in accord with the bylaw. And you probably want to do that with delegation as well, because delegation speaks to the 4 various responses, and that's proposed to be changed. So there's a couple of, and even electronic meetings. So there are a few policies that directly will be affected. In the interim between the time the bylaw is approved and the policy is updated, anything that conflicts, the bylaw overrides policy. But I wouldn't ask the staff and the board to update the policies and at the same time. I think you're allowed to have a bit of time period, but those should be high priorities for policy committee.
Mr. Chair, another clarification.
Yes, please go ahead.
So we were on the previous topic that we talked about the quorum and stuff. In this 7.2.13 report to the board, it says a minority of any committee may report to the board. So we don't have to have, my understanding is we don't have to have quorum. What's the meaning of that? 7.2.1.
Yes, there are 7.2.13, which is page 37 of 57 in the PDF, or 9 of 22 on the bottom of the clean copy. What that refers to is, in Robert says that the majority of the committee can make a report, is the committee's report. But there are such things, and you see them more often in. No. Certainly. You will see more often in provincial or federal legislature that the majority of the committee approves a report. The other members who are not the majority can make a separate report of the minority of the committee, which has a title that is also a movie. Not a good one, but a movie. And so when it says here, a minority of any committee may also report, Robert does not give the minority of a committee the automatic right to make a report. So if you have a committee of 7, but let's use school uniform committee. School uniform committee consists of 7 members. 4 of them agree that the school uniform should be changed to be bright yellow. So that is the report of the committee. The committee reports to the board. We recommend that school uniforms all be bright yellow in color. The 3 members can issue, because of this line, the 3 members can present a report to the board saying, we disagree with the majority. We believe that the school uniform should all be green. Without that line in the bylaw, those three members do not automatically have a right to present that opinion to the board. This line gives them that. So it does not say that a minority of a committee that we can act, but that's what it does.
Thank you. That was painful for me. So, no, I'll tell you afterwards. So we basically have gone through it. There's a couple of changes we have to make. So let's stand at ease and we'll determine what our next steps are. And so maybe 5 minutes or so.
I'm good with that.
Trustee O'Brien?
Hello. Hi.
So we have Parliamentary Kapoor's opinion and advice on how we're to proceed. So would you like to reiterate that? I was paying attention. I did understand what you said, but if you'd like to repeat it, you'd probably say it better.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to very much thank Rosie for her help in retrieving terms of reference for me. Under the terms of reference for this committee that were approved by the board, you have full authority to consult legal. You do not need a separate motion, or it's not a business item that you have to do to take a version to legal. Will this committee to make the form.
So that's, we'll send it to legal, and then we'll try and get a timeline. And more than likely, we would have to call a special meeting, but I'll try to do it on a night when we're having another meeting, because I think it would only be, we'll only need to block a half hour for it. Trustee O'Brien, did you have a comment?
Just one. Could we do it after October 24th? Chair?
Oh, sorry. It's really going to be dictated by when legal can get it back to us. We have to have it done November 1st. So yeah, once I know, then we'll circulate some times, but hopefully, the intent is to try and do it the same day as another meeting, so we don't have to drag everybody in for a special meeting. It shouldn't take a lot of time. So we'll see. I don't, at this point, I don't know. We haven't even engaged with legal to see what their turnaround time is.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So I think for tonight, unless anybody has any questions, comments, or concerns, we're done. I'd like to thank Rosie for your help, and thank Director Kroll and always Parliamentary Kapoor. This has been vital that you were here to help us. Tremendous amount of work went into this document over a long period of time. I think we've done some really good work. I think it's going to benefit the incoming board and make things easier and more efficient, which then benefits our system. So thank you all. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Moved O'Brien and
Trustee O'Brien, seconded by Trustee O'Hearn Chernada. Any opposed? Oh, we don't have quorum anyway. Doesn't matter. Okay. So then we will move to the closing prayer. Let's do a Hail Mary. We haven't done one in a little while, and it's my favorite prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary,
Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Thank you, everyone. Good work.
Yeah, great work. It was a pleasure working with you on this committee. And I think we did a good service to our community by putting this document forward. Thank you.
Chair Murphy. Sorry. Everybody have a good night.